on page 479. Page 480 says, according to Piaget, it's during adolescence that cognitive development reaches its fullest potential. That is, the level of formal operational thought. What they're saying is that earlier than the adolescence, you haven't developed your cognitive abilities to the place to where you have now become an adult in your thinking. So, according to Piaget, it's during adolescence when you reach this maximum capacity for thinking. That might be why adolescents, since their cognitive abilities have reached the reached the pinnacle or the maximum, and it's like they finally have graduated from childlike thinking. Gotcha, Hannah. To, well, how are you today, Hannah?
I'm good.
Okay, then I'll mark you present. It could be that by the time you've reached formal operational thinking, well, Caitlin, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
All right. So, I think that might be why adolescents, is it okay if I say, want to argue? I mean, is that what they want to do? Or they want to discuss things. Is that a better way to say it? They want to discuss things. Now that they've reached this level of thinking, what Piaget calls formal operational thinking, they want to talk about stuff because now they're thinking about it, and so they want to have a discussion with other adults. But I discovered years ago working with younger adolescents. Now you guys are what I call older adolescents in college. Younger. Have any of you noticed now that you're in college what happens when seniors in high school come to visit college and hang out in your classroom or in your dorm?
You seem so young.
Don't they? I mean, it's right. It's just like and then I like to say to students in this class, and it was only a couple of years ago or 3 years ago that you were just like that, and you go, I wasn't like that. But that's what's happening. See, that's why I think as older adolescents, you really have reached put together this package of formal operational thinking. And that's why I think often we want to have discussions or debates or argue about things, because now we're thinking about it. We want to talk about it and kind of wrestle with all these issues. Well, there are 5 abilities that are involved in formal operational thinking. One of them is deductive reasoning. So how good are you at deductive reasoning? Okay, look around the room today and notice what people are wearing. What would you conclude? That it's warm outside or a little cold outside?
Cold.
A little bit chilly, but not cold because nobody has a winter coat on.
Now, is that deductive thinking or inductive thinking? Looking at examples and drawing a conclusion is called, oh, you don't know. You haven't studied that yet? Looking at examples and drawing conclusions based on what you see in those examples, that's inductive reasoning. So what's deductive reasoning? Hey, it was 27 degrees on the thermometer when I left home today. What does that tell you about how people are going to dress on campus? See, we're talking about up here, making a generalization about what's going to happen. So how are people? So what's I going to be wearing when she comes into class today, since it's 27 degrees outside? A coat. There you go. See, now that's deductive reasoning. That's taking some kind of general principle and applying it to a specific situation. But I'm thinking that when it comes to formal operational thought, you probably ought to be able to do both deductive and inductive thinking. You ought to be able to think both directions. So watch this. A bunch of adolescents get together and they start utilizing their formal operational thinking ability. So who do they consult? Older adults who've had a lot of experience, or their own peers who are just as inexperienced as they are? Now, that doesn't seem to be very smart, Micah. I mean, it seems to me like if you're trying to sort this stuff out, you would want to talk to people who've been down the road of life. And why does that happen? Well, it says on page 480 in your textbook, after it talks about these 5 abilities that they've developed as adolescents, it says, however, adolescents are still limited by adolescents' egocentrism, the inability to distinguish between your abstract reasoning thoughts and the abstract reasoning thoughts of others. Now, see, it's almost like that's not just individual, that's also kind of a group thing. That, hey, don't ask older people, what do they know about it? This is our time and our generation. We'll sort this out ourselves. So that's kind of that tendency is kind of a reflection of this egocentric thinking that they're still carrying around from their childhood. That we can figure it out. It's like, yeah, you could, but you might make a lot of mistakes when you could ask some older people and gain from their experience. Yeah, but older people. Yeah, what about them? Well, they're kind of stuck in a rut. And I'm going, and you guys aren't stuck in any ruts? Well, no. Well, what about the rut that says you don't ask older people for advice because they don't know anything? Wouldn't that be called a rut? Well, I guess it could be. And see, in other words, since they can think like this, I say, let's engage adolescents in this thinking process. Let's talk through this stuff. So let's talk about deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Just like in the last chapter where it talked about adolescents' physical development and it talked about sexual activity. Okay, let's do some deductive reasoning. If God said He created them male and female and that He intended for sexual relationships to be within the confines of marriage, if that was God's design, then what would you conclude would be the best way for people to live individually? To wait to become sexually active until they get married and then restrict their sexual activity to the confines of a marriage relationship. You follow that? And as I said last time when we were talking about the last chapter, that over the weekend I heard a sermon that the guy talked about, he was talking about people promoting safe sex, and he said safe sex is sex within the confines of marriage, and any other kinds of sexual activity, whether it be adultery or promiscuity or whatever, it's simply unsafe, and it's damaging both to the body, the mind, the spirit, to social relationships. And he just went on about, and I thought, boy, this guy has really put a message together. And I thought, and that's pretty brave of him to preach that message in front of all these people in this modern day and age, because that's not necessarily what the culture we live in is promoting. But what drove him to preach that message? Seeing the damage that sexual activity outside of marriage has done, and seeing what God says about it. I mean, if God makes a statement about something, then wouldn't we conclude that there's a reason for him giving us that, and embracing that and putting that into practice will be the best way to make our lives better? Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not lie. So what? Just don't steal stuff, and just don't lie about things. I mean, when I worked with younger adolescents, when I was a high school principal, I would say to them, you know, God doesn't say much in the Bible about throwing a baseball and breaking a window in the school building, but he does say something about lying and about honesty. So, boys, you guys were all out there in the playground playing ball. What I need you to do is just to be honest. That's what God expects of you. And just tell me, which one of you threw or hit the ball that broke the window? I just want the person who did it to just be honest. That's what God wants you to do, and just own up to it. Now, why would someone not just raise his hand and say, I'm the one that hit the ball that broke the window? Why would a young adolescent be reluctant to just speak up and say that? Because he might get in trouble. Yeah, so to avoid getting in trouble, I'm going to lie? No, that's offensive to God. Now you've made double trouble. In fact, I said to these boys, if you lie to me, I'll suspend you from school for 2 days. If you tell the truth, we'll just talk about how to pay for the window and get it fixed. You follow me? Lying, to me, was a bigger deal to God than a broken window. So, wouldn't you think everybody would just be straightforward and tell the truth? You know what's happened? Our culture has so promoted this idea that I don't want to get in trouble, so I better not tell the truth. The devil's a liar and the father of lies, and he's promoted that kind of notion. And I spend a lot of time trying to help kids. In fact, when the kids would, on their schoolwork, if they were given an assignment in math, they would ask if they could work together. And I said, what do you mean work together? You mean you're going to help somebody else understand it? Or you're going to work problem 1 and they're going to work problem 2 and you'll work problem 3 and you'll share your answers and each of you do half the work and turn in the paper? Because if that's what you're doing, then each of you get half, put both your names on the paper and I'll give each of you half credit. But just be honest about it. Just be honest about what's going on. And if you really, truly did work the problem yourself and then you help somebody else, the person you helped, if they want to be totally honest, just write on your paper, I got help on this one and this one and this one. You follow me? Just be honest. And I'd give them credit for honesty by saying, hey, if you got the problem done and you needed some help, you asked for help, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the Bible talks about asking for help and getting help from someone. So I'm thinking that just think it through. Just embrace the directives that God has given and then live accordingly and be honest with people. Just be honest. And I really found that when I was in Peoria, Illinois, working with all these adolescents, young adolescents, starting a high school, that part of the culture in that city had been that cheating was just part of life. Now, I don't know if it's because the major employer in that town was Caterpillar Tractor, so that the majority of parents were factory workers. You go, well, what about factory workers? Well, I had a guy take me out to visit the Caterpillar tractor plant one time just to see what it was like. He said, it's cool to see how we build these big old Caterpillar tractors. So I went out there to see, and we're leaving at the end of the shift. The whistle blows, and we're going out the door, and all these guys are headed for the door, and then they make a detour to the restroom. And I go, what's going on? He goes, oh, there's a guard at the door that's checking lunch pails. Checking lunch pails? What, to see if you ate your lunch? I mean, no, what was he checking lunch pails for?
They stole something?
To see if people were stealing something. So all the people who were stealing stuff were making a detour into the restroom to dump it in the trash and then go back out through the door because there was a guard at the door. Today, he's not there every day. And I looked at this guy and I said, what kind of culture do we have here at Caterpillar Tractor? Is stealing a normal part of life? And if you steal something from the Caterpillar Tractor and take it home, and it's a tool, and your kids see that tool, and they see it has Caterpillar Tractor on it, what do they conclude? That there's nothing wrong with stealing. Do you follow the culture that I'm talking about? And guess what? The stores in this little town had a constant problem with kids shoplifting. And I'm not even sure that if the legal system in town really thought shoplifting was all that big a deal. And then when I said to the students one time, when I see somebody shoplifting in a store, I go immediately to the manager and say, I thought you'd like to know that guy just took a CD and put it inside his coat so you could stop him and get your CD back. And guess what these adolescents did? Whoa! And I said, what? And they got all upset about it. They said, you narc? Narc? What's a narc?
Tattletale.
Yeah, you tattletale? You told on him. Yeah, I said, because if every other person, if half the people pay for CDs like me and the other half steal them, guess who's paying for the CD that was stolen? Those of us who pay. They raise the price to cover the losses that come from shoplifting. So I'm thinking, let the shoplifter pay for making me pay more for the CD. And they go, oh, I never thought of that. Well, start doing some of this formal kinds of thinking, logical thinking. That's the second one. Reasoning logically about stuff, about concepts, about truth, about justice, about fairness, about freedom. If it's okay for someone to shoplift, then why would anybody pay for anything? Because it's not okay, it's wrong. Then if it's wrong, let's not do it. But what if you want something really bad and you don't have any money? Then get a job and earn some money so you can buy it. I mean, is that logical, or am I being unreasonable? Well, yeah, Mr. Bonine, because where am I going to get a job? I said, come to my house and rake leaves. Paint a fence. I'll hire you to do something, shovel snow, and I'll pay you for it so you can take the money and go buy something. Well, I don't want to work for the stuff I have. What, you want somebody else to do all the work and just give it to you? Well, what's wrong with that? Well, if we all took that approach, I don't want to bake the bread, I just want to eat it. Well, let's all join in that club and see what happens. Nobody's baking the bread. There's no bread to eat, people. Like a guy on a national program said recently when he was being interviewed. He said, you know what socialism is? It's where you take from the rich and give to the poor. You take from those who work and give to those who don't work. And it isn't long before socialism reaches the level where everybody's holding their hand out and nobody's working. And it's just like, that's the logic of where that kind of thinking leads. And again, the Bible talks about those kind of things. That don't steal, but rather work with your hands. So you say, look, if you want something, go get a job. And that's the second kind of formal operational thinking, is reasoning logically. And let's reason logically about truth. One of the things it talks about is concepts: truth, justice, fairness, freedom are the ones that are mentioned in the book. So let's talk about truth. Some guy says there are no absolute truths. And what are you supposed to ask him? Put your hand in the air, and what do you ask the guy who says that? Is what you just said absolutely true? And if he says yes, then what did he just say?
Contradicted himself.
He contradicted himself. Then he said there is one absolute. If he says no, then you say, well, then maybe it's true and maybe it isn't, which means there's still the possibility that there could be absolutes. Agreed? He says no. Well, there you are. Then you're making an absolute statement. And that's the other thing, that's another dimension here, is simply considering all the logical possibilities. Letting your mind go to where does that take us? If everything is relative, if there are no absolutes, then we have no solid, firm place to start with how we ought to live. When I learned to drive a car, took a driver's training test, and I lived in the country, and there were a few hills where I lived. Here in Missouri, there's tons of them. And so what do they do to make sure you don't drive across the center line to pass a car that's going slow and maybe run into somebody that you can't see who's on the other side of a hill? What do they paint on the side of the white line that's down the middle of the road? A yellow line that says what? This is a no passing zone. Hey, don't tell me when I can pass and when I can't pass. I don't see any cars coming. In fact, the attitude about driving has changed so much that when I drive down into southern Missouri to go fishing or something, and I'm driving up and down those hilly roads, I constantly look to see where I'm going to go in the ditch in case some lawless person who's still thinking only about himself comes over the hill on my side of the road and I have to get out of his way. And it's like, why would you have to think like that? Because there are people who won't obey the rules of the road, who won't treat those as hard and fast rules that everybody ought to follow. Say, well, yeah, but if I stay behind that slow driving truck, it's going to make me late to where I'm going. So what's it better to do? To break the rule and be on time, or to be late? And what's the answer? Be late. No, I can't be late. I have to be on time. Oh, I like the fact that even the way, God's the one who invented time, right? And He gave it to us. Okay, when does the sun come up? At the same time every day? Does that tell you something about God's system of timing? It's a little variable. So lighten up. Really? You go, yeah, well, you lighten up. We're not here at 9:30 when class is supposed to start. You mark us tardy. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Well, that's not fair. Why? Well, you ought to mark us tardy all the time or not at all. Or, those are two options, or a third one could be, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. They go, well, I don't like your third one. Well, who said you were going to like all the options in life? Well, that's not fair. Have you ever heard some older person respond to when an adolescent says, that's not fair?
Life's not fair.
That's exactly right, Micah. Life's not fair. Get used to it. Let's face it. Life is just not fair.
God's grace isn't fair either.
What?
God's grace isn't fair either.
You know what? when this logic stuff, because I teach math and think mathematically and have studied logic and I like it, that it's like if God did the logical thing, what would he do with the human race?
Right.
Burn that one and try it over again. Create a new Adam and Eve and let's see if they can do better. I mean, really, wouldn't it? I mean, if God zapped every child who talked back to their parents, well, there goes the human race. God's grace is just gracious. And I say, if God defies logic in the way he relates to us, then it's okay for us to do some things that aren't always purely logical. Which means that when it comes to truth, I have two kinds of truth I live with. Capital T truth that comes right out of the Bible, and small t truth that comes from the stuff that people discover and give us. Like, for example, the solar system. So, is Pluto a planet?
They don't know.
No, not anymore.
It used to be. I mean, I was taught it was a planet. Yeah, because that's all we knew. Now, have all of you followed this little trajectory where they sent this little thing out past Pluto to fly out into space and take pictures? And this thing's been traveling for I don't know how many years now. And guess what? I can't wait to see the new science books that put the new picture of the solar system that we've discovered with our new scientific discoveries. It would be the same picture that you see in the books now, except Pluto would be the biggest one of those little ice balls that form and go around the solar system like a big donut. And they don't know how wide that donut is. They're still flying this thing through space, taking pictures of all these little ice balls out there, and realizing that it's just full of this stuff. And I think, wow, that's cool stuff. That's small t truth. Capital T truth is, in the beginning, Genesis chapter 1, what? God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, let there be light. The sun came into existence. Now, do you understand why some scientists would say, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard of? Because it just doesn't fit inside his mind and his frame of reference. And every time I meet somebody, I said, why do you even believe that? I said, because I read it in the Bible. Well, he said, in fact, one guy said to me, a friend of mine who's a Christian and who loves the Lord, but he went to a Christian liberal arts college where they taught, here's what he believes. He said, how can you believe that God created the world in 6 days based on the scientific evidence? Now, see, the scientific evidence is small t truth. The Bible is capital T truth. And I say, because God told me. Now, if God had just said he created the heavens and the earth and stopped there and didn't talk about the 6 days of creation, then there would be no argument. You follow me? He and I wouldn't have this discussion. But God decided to tell us not only that he did it, but he told us how he did it, and he even told us that he took 6 days to do it and then rested on the seventh day. And that's capital T truth. So no matter what the small t truth says, the small t truth has to fit under capital T truth. And my friend, who still wants to argue with me every time I see him, wants to say that no, the small t truth has become so overwhelming that it's now capital T truth, and the Bible is small t truth. Now, he won't really say that, but that's really what he's practicing. And that's a dangerous place to go. I mean, they're talking about this formal operational thinking, considering all the logical possibilities. or possible combinations. Okay, there either is a God or there isn't. I believe there is. Joe believes there isn't. So, what are the possibilities? If there is a God, then when he dies, he's in serious trouble. When I die, I've done what the God of the universe said I should do, accepted his son as my Savior. So I go to heaven and he doesn't. That's a dangerous position to take. Yeah, but the guy says, but what if I'm right? And then you die and none of that was true. I'm going, well, it sure made for a better life on earth. You follow me? I benefit both now and for all eternity because of taking God at his word and trusting him and doing what he wants. The guy who rejects it is taking a huge big risk in life. And supposedly, as you develop your formal operational thinking, you start to consider the cost of the different risks in life and then make informed, reasonable choices that come closer to resulting in the best possible outcome. So obviously, even though older adolescents have fully developed their formal operational thinking capacities, we have a whole bunch of people in this world who really still haven't embraced formal operational thinking. Okay, let's we talked about truth. Let's think about justice. We talked about fairness. Let's think about freedom. Are you free to do anything you want to do? Say, hey, I have a driver's license. I can drive my car any way I want. I don't have to follow the rules of the road. No, you don't. What will happen if you keep breaking the rules of the road?
You'll get arrested.
You get stopped. They give you a ticket. You say, who cares? Throw it in the back of the rest of the tickets. What happens after a while? You got a back seat full of tickets because you don't follow the rules. The next time you get pulled over, the guy goes, oh, I just ran a scan on you and your driver's license, and guess what? You don't get a ticket today. What happens? Put your hands behind your back. We're going to take you downtown and tow your car to the police storage lot because there's a warrant out for your arrest for all those outstanding tickets. And the judge says, if you don't pay up on those tickets and do the right thing, you'll go to jail. So you're free to do whatever you want? No, you're not, because once he sends you to jail for 2 years, you're not going to drive your car around your jail cell. Your freedoms have just been restricted because you wouldn't live within the guidelines of the law of the land. Is that reasonable? I think, okay, let's do some formal operational thinking and say, this is just the way life is. Separating reality from possibilities. What are the possibilities? I talked about those the other day. Wouldn't it be nice if I didn't have to reach in my pocket and pull out my key card to get in the door? Does anyone know why they lock the door anyway on the building, so we have to use key cards?
It was just open all the time, so practically anybody could get in here, I think.
So who would come in here except people who were going to school or going to class?
Well, they found a hobo in our gym last semester.
Because the door's open, it's cold out here.
Yeah.
So let's just, if I'm outside and it's cold and the door's unlocked, I'm thinking I'm going inside and get warm. In fact, he comes inside and gets warm and finds out that there's showers in all these between these classrooms. Whoa! Guess what, guys? He tells all of his friends, I found a place to take a shower. The door's unlocked. They even have snacks in the hallway. I can pick up some candy bars while I'm there. Oh, well, guess what? We better lock the doors and tell everybody to use the key. So think of the possibilities. Wouldn't it be nice if those of us who have to use this building all the time didn't have to pull that card out and put it in that little slot? We could just, have them put a camera on the wall. We just look in the camera and it reads our eye and the door pops open. Is that a possibility?
Expensive one.
What?
An expensive possibility.
Oh, that would be too expensive. So tell him to quit complaining about getting the card out of his pocket. Just pull it out of your pocket and put it in the slot to open the door. Because we're trying to keep this a safe place for people to go to school and concentrate on school. Okay, so I've thought of some other possibilities. Maybe we could just figure out where all these hobos are and have somebody put them in a bus and take them to Texas where it doesn't get this cold. Why would, if you want to live outdoors, why would you live outdoors in Missouri or Iowa or Minnesota when you could live outdoors in Texas or New Mexico or Arizona?
I heard Hawaii has a high rate of home.
I'm thinking if I was going to be homeless, that would be a good place to go.
Just one-way ticket there.
Just figure out some way to get there. Figure out some way to get there. Okay. The fifth dimension of formal operational thinking is thinking about your own thinking. Thinking about your own thinking. You just had a thought about something? Did you? So, think about leaving here and getting something to eat. I'm thinking about it. So what are you thinking? I'm thinking I can't decide whether when I leave here and get in my car and leave campus, do I want to go to McDonald's and get a breakfast sandwich, or Arby's and get a buy one fish sandwich, get one free? Or is today Friday? What does it have to do with anything? On Friday, Price Chopper sells these huge, big fish fillets for $3. You didn't know that? Why do they do that?
It's Fish Friday.
What's this Fish Friday thing, Logan?
No idea, just because it's Friday.
You don't know about that?
Don't Catholics do.
What'd you say, Micah?
It's Lent.
That's exactly right.
Lent, right.
This guy is winning points with his Catholic friends and with his Catholic priest and a whole bunch of ways. And when we were in Illinois, we loved it. There was a restaurant that had fish on Friday, all you can eat, and it was real cheap just because he was doing a good Catholic thing. You say, you went up there on Friday and ate that fish that was cooked by that Catholic? I sure did. Do you think he was doing that for Protestants? I'm sure he wasn't. But he didn't ask at the door. He didn't have a sign that said Catholics only. You go, yeah, but I would think as a Protestant you would want to stay away from his establishment. No, as a Protestant, I want to go up there on Friday and cash in on his fish deal and eat all the fish I can. So why are you thinking that way? Because it'll save some money. Just like when I said, why don't we have some way to just look in there and it recognizes us, lets us in? Because it's too expensive. It would cost too much. So you start thinking about, why do I even have these thoughts anyway? Did the rest of you think of something? When I said, so think of something you would like to eat. See, my mind is just running around. I still can't settle on something. I'm thinking of all the things I could eat. I didn't even mention a $1 cheeseburger from McDonald's. I can't believe they sell that cheeseburger for $1. That is so cool. Why would you say that's so cool, Tom? When you were in high school, you could stop by Pack-A-Sack and buy 7 of them for $1. Yeah, but I only made $1 an hour when I was working too. But that's okay. Gas was 25 cents a gallon, so I would work an hour for $1 and buy 4 gallons worth of gas. How much does gas cost you for your car? $2. So take that times 4, $8. Is that about what you make per hour if you minimum wage, if you have a job out there somewhere? It's like, hey, you guys are in the same boat I was in. It's just the rate of exchange is a little higher for you than it was for me. A lot of things haven't changed that much, except one thing's changed, which really upsets me. Now see, thinking about your own thinking. Why does it upset you, Tom? Because it's just not right. That's why. It's a moral issue. It's a fairness, a justice, and kind of thing. It's the company that owns Velveeta taking advantage of everybody. When I was in high school, we couldn't afford to buy cheese at our house, real cheese, because it cost too much. But Kraft knew that there were poor people who couldn't buy real cheese, so they would take the stuff that was left over when they made cheese and mix some stuff with it and make this stuff that's a cheese byproduct called Velveeta. And you could buy a 2-pound loaf for less than what a pound of cheese cost. So we bought it and ate it. And now you go to the store and you want to buy a 2-pound loaf of Velveeta, and what's the price tag on it? $8? It doesn't cost them $8. I mean, the markup on Velveeta is outrageous. Does anyone know why Kraft decided to raise the price on Velveeta? Why would you buy Velveeta instead of real cheese when you're going to have a party with a whole room full of chips? Because Velveeta mixed with Rotel makes
Chip dip.
a fabulous chip dip. And Kraft discovered that people were using their cheap cheese byproduct to make this delicious dip. And they said, you know what? Velveeta cheese dip has become so popular, we can raise the price, and those folks will keep paying it. And they have. They've just been raising the price. Gasoline and potatoes and all that other stuff, pretty much milk and bread pretty much stay the same in terms of ratio kind of stuff, but those Velveeta people. Now, okay, Tom, why are you so worked up about the Velveeta people? I mean, what's the problem? Think about your own thoughts there. I'll tell you what the problem is. When I was younger and it was cheap, I developed an appetite for it. And now that they're gouging us at $8 a package, I don't want to pay that much for it. You understand? I'm just a little miffed that they've raised the price when they didn't really need to. Say, well, are you bothered that they're taking advantage of other people? Yeah, now that you add that bothers me too. But you just need to learn to think about your own thoughts. Why would I call my wife when I leave here today and say, Nina, do you need anything from the store? Why do you do that, Tom? Do you really want to get out of the car and go to the store and buy something? Or would you rather just go straight home and upload the video to YouTube and take a nap? Yeah, upload the video and take a nap. Yeah, but think about it. Ladies, if I get home, if I don't call my wife before I go home, and I get home, walk the door, any idea what she'll say to me? How come you didn't call, Tom? I didn't feel like going to the store. Oh, that's too bad. Why is that too bad? because I needed some stuff. And being a husband who wants to provide for his family, so I say, so what did you need? And she says, I've got a list right here. I was going to read it to you over the phone. You ladies, you know how to work us like it's amazing. And she goes, I have it right here. But she said, but that's okay. We'll do without milk. Do without milk. You want to bet? On Friday morning before I come to school, or Thursday, I need my bowl of Cheerios with milk in it. We're out of milk, so I'll put water in your Cheerios? I don't think so. Give me the list. I'm going to get in the car and go back to the store. You understand why I make the phone call? I'm just saving myself some grief. Is that the only reason, Tom? No, the other reason is it makes my wife think I'm such a cool husband. So she doesn't have to get out and go to the store. And so I just call her and say, you need anything from the store? And sometimes she says, no, I don't. And then I'm going, well, I think I'll stop anyway at Price Chopper just to see if they have one of those big smoked chickens on sale. The Price Chopper in Belton, they sell a chicken that's called a smoked chicken. It's been cooked in a smoker. And I look at them, and if they have a big one there that weighs 3 pounds for $6, that's only $2 a pound for chicken already cooked. I'll take it home, and it is so delicious. I can't even eat Hy-Vee or Walmart's chicken anymore because I've developed this taste. It's kind of like ice cream. Once you taste Blue Bell ice cream, you can't eat the rest of that stuff out there anymore. It's just not any good. You develop a taste for it. So, see, that's why thinking about your thoughts, just thinking about the thoughts you have about stuff and why do you have those thoughts, that's the fifth part of formal operational thinking. I've already told you, however, what the book says on page 480, that adolescents still have some limitations in this area. And down on page 483, it actually says that some researchers believe that only 50% of 18 to 20-year-olds use formal operational thinking. It isn't that they can't do it, they just don't do it because it gives them a headache. They'd rather not think about it. They just want to go ahead and do something. And that's a scary thought. You know what? I'm thinking that if we did some more research today, it might be not just 50% of 18 to 20-year-olds, but 15% of 18 to 40 or 50-year-olds. You know what I'm talking about? Look at the older generation around you. There's a whole bunch of folks out there that just aren't thinking. And when we say thinking, what we're really making reference to is this formal operational thought process that pretty much culminates when you become an upper adolescent, and it should be developed and used for the rest of your life. But it often isn't. Page 483 talks about something. Researchers have tended to focus on the negative outcomes of adolescent risk-taking, but a moderate degree of risk-taking in many situations may not be a bad thing. Would you say a moderate degree of risk-taking could be a good thing? So, all risk-taking isn't bad. So let's talk about risk-taking. Have you ever taken a risk? And did it turn out to be beneficial? Yes, I have. So, a moderate degree of risk-taking can be a good thing. Have you ever taken a risk and it turned out to be a bad thing? Yeah? So, what do you say about that one? I don't take those kinds of risk anymore. I mean, I know it isn't necessarily the smartest thing to do, but if I had a bad experience, I tend not to take another chance at that, to take that risk again. So, again, think about your own thinking process when it comes to risk taking and how you feel about it. Page 483 also talks about post-formal reasoning. There are 3 dimensions of post-formal reasoning. And maybe they use the word post-formal reasoning, but maybe it's beyond formal reasoning or outside of the boundaries of formal reasoning. And the three kinds of thinking are what's practical within a given context. Can I accept some contradictions in life? And relativistic reasoning. Is this practical? Can I accept these contradictions? What's one of the biggest contradictions we have to accept when we come to looking at all the concepts presented in the Bible? And we can't always fit them together. God's sovereignty and man's
Free will.
What?
Free will.
Man's free will. I know God is sovereign, and I know He gives me the capacity to make choices. And how do I fit those two together? I don't. Now, I have some friends who say, I've got it figured out, and they fit them together. I'm going, so, tell me how you made this fit together. And guess what? The way they made it fit together is they either landed on the sovereignty side and weakened free will, or they landed on the free will side and weakened sovereignty. And I said to a guy one time, I'm thinking that both of you guys, because I've got friends on both sides, both of you guys have done an injustice to the whole counsel of God. And they go, so what's your solution, Tom? And I said, why don't you just embrace both and leave the resolution of the contradiction to when you go to heaven, and you'll see things as God sees things. And one of my friends said, Tom, that's your problem. You don't wrestle with this stuff enough. I said, well, it could be your problem is that you wrestle with it too much and end up pushing aside something God has said because you can't make it fit into your scheme of thinking. I'm kind of thankful. Okay, personally, when someone says, so you accept contradictions? I say, yeah. And I'm kind of thankful that God's mind is so much bigger than mine that I can't fit all of His thoughts together. If I could take all of God's thoughts and fit them into my head, then what would that say about the mind of God? It's not any bigger than my human capacity, and I know better than that. I mean, God has given me the capacity to think, but there isn't any way in my present situation and condition that I can think just like He does. In fact, my theory is that He tells us some ways He wants us to think because we wouldn't have thought of it on our own, because it's such a revolutionary thought. It's such a maybe even impractical thought, maybe even beyond reasoning thought that He just wants me to embrace and trust Him and follow Him. The textbook says on page 483 that relativistic reasoning says knowledge is subjective and depends on the experience and the perspective of the individual. If you want to have some fun, Google is all knowledge subjective and see what you find. And guess what you'll find? You'll find people who don't embrace the Bible, who will actually say, if all knowledge was subjective, there would be no order in the universe. You follow what's going on? So it's like some knowledge has become objective knowledge because, okay, is it subjective or objective knowledge that the earth rotates around the sun in 365 and 1/4 days? Approximately. And that's been going on so long. And where we live, on the globe that's tilted at 23 degrees, results in us having 4 seasons. So we can pretty well count. No, it could be that next year we'll only have 2 seasons. You understand the thinking? I said maybe if the earth tilted a little bit or something, if something changes drastically. But even secular people will say all knowledge is not totally subjective. That all of us embrace some objective truth that we've seen over and over and over again. Page 484 says teenagers gradually come to understand that while knowledge may be based on subjective experience, one can still develop consistent views that are supported by evidence. And have any of you read that book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict? Have you ever read any of these books that talk about evidences to support embracing a Christian worldview? They're valuable books to read. Situated cognition says thinking always takes place within a specific context. Therefore, the more relevant the context of the problem, the more we will think about finding a solution. Situated cognition. Just thinking. In fact, some people look at situated cognition. A guy at the university said to me, "Tom, I know why you're a Christian." And I said, "You do?" And he said, "Yes, because your parents were Christians and you were raised that way." And I said, "No, that's not the way it happened." He goes, "What?" Because he just kind of assumes that everybody practices what they were taught as a child. And I said, "No, that's not the way it happened." He goes, "Well, how did it happen?" I said, "I didn't grow up in a Christian home. It was a good moral home, but I didn't become a Christian until I was 18 years old." And so he looked at me, and he goes, he was a teacher in one of my psychology classes, and he said, "So how did you become a Christian when you were 18? Didn't he just invite me to give my testimony of how I got saved?" So I'm standing in front of this guy after class, and I'm telling him about how I was just torn up in life about how am I going to figure out what to do in the future. And I went to church and talked to this guy about it, and he opened up the Bible, and he showed me some scriptures in the book of Romans. The Romans Road. Have any of you been down the Romans Road? He took me down the Romans Road, and I was telling this guy what those scriptures were. And when he was finished, I'm going, "Whoa, I've never heard this before." And I asked Jesus to come into my life and be my Savior. He said, "You did what?" I said, "I asked Jesus to come into my life and be my Savior." He said, "And what happened?" And I said, "Jesus came into my life, and he's now my Savior." He said, "Are you saying that Jesus lives in you?" And I said, "I'll give you a quote right from the Bible. Christ in me is my hope of glory." Isn't it? And he goes, "Woo." Like this is kind of far out stuff. You know what? I'm thinking being a Christian is kind of far out stuff. And why would we apologize for it or be ashamed of it? To be thankful that we have a connection with the creator of the universe through his Son who came to earth to be our Savior. Whoa! And where are we going to go when we die? To be absent from the body is to be what? Present with the Lord. And I don't know about you, but it's fun to look at the book of Revelation just to see what's going to happen when he wraps things up and says, it's all over, folks. Going to create a new heaven and a new earth and a new Jerusalem. Wow. How awesome is that stuff? So sometimes our situation does dictate our thinking, but many times our situation just prompts us to think about it. I mean, I have to tell you, well, one of the things it says over here, I'll just jump over there now. On page 510, no, page 508. On page 508, your textbook says, one of the biggest decisions that adolescents must grapple with is what occupation to work toward. Okay, now I'm thinking back when I was an adolescent in high school. They told me that I was good in math. I knew that already. They gave me a test and said, and guess what? America is going to be building roads all over. The Eisenhower interstate system didn't exist back then. And they said, you should be a civil engineer. You like the outdoors? I grew up on a farm. If you grow up on a farm, you like the outdoors. You're good at math. You should be a civil engineer. I'm going, sounds good to me. So I went off to college and enrolled in a civil engineering program. But the school where I went to study civil engineering had changed the program. It used to be you took all these courses to learn how to be a civil engineer. Then at the end of the courses, you went to Colorado and spent a summer doing civil engineering. And a lot of guys who finished all their course of study found out when they got to Colorado they didn't like it. So all of a sudden it's like, now what do I do? So the school where I went, Oklahoma State University, had switched the program around where after you go through a year of classes, you go to Colorado and do civil engineering in the summertime to see what you think of it. And I didn't like it. And I came back home thinking, well, I just spent a year studying civil engineering and that didn't work out. So let's go to the library and get an encyclopedia of occupations and just start flipping through the pages and see if you find one that looks interesting. If you do, write it down and then keep going and write down the next one. And have you figured out what was going on in my mathematical, analytical mind? That if I have a list of 10 occupations that look interesting and I go to college for 1 year to study all 10 of them, I'll be 28 years old before I figured out what I want to do in life. And I sat there thinking, is that all life is? Is just a big shot in the dark? I mean, I live in an orderly world. We planted crops and the wheat sprouted and grew, and some of those wheat berries were 30, 60, and 100%, 100 grains on a stalk of wheat. And it's like it happened over and over and over. And I said, this is an orderly universe I live in. Somehow I've missed out on something. And I sat there thinking, what have I missed out on? And here's what I concluded. The people I know who seem to have a sense of direction go to church and I don't. You better go to church and check this thing out. And wouldn't you know, I went to church to check it out, and guess what happened? I got saved. I became a Christian. And after I became a Christian, how many jobs did I have? You know what? My occupation didn't matter anymore once I had a walk with God and I could acknowledge Him in all my ways. I mean, I did a lawn mowing service. I worked at a bank. I sold insurance. I became a math and Bible teacher in a Christian high school. And I said to my wife, I think I could do this the rest of my life. And she said, go for it. And then after 10 years of that, I came to work at Calvary. So what is that, about 6 different occupations? And I don't know if you've read this or not, but it used to be, in your grandparents' time, that a person would go to work for a company and stay there till they're retired. And the modern generation doesn't do that. The companies don't offer that kind of retirement anyway. And the old people they offered it to, they usually take it away from them or file bankruptcy or something before they can all cash in. So basically what happens is that, may I suggest here that on page 508, the biggest decision that an adolescent needs to grapple with is, what are they going to do about their relationship to God? What are they going to do with Jesus Christ, not what occupation they're going to work toward? And if you get your life right with God and you acknowledge Him in all your ways, He'll direct your path and take you to the occupation or occupations that He wants you to have at various chapters in your life. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's turn back over here and talk about intelligence on page 489. Intelligence can be defined in many different ways. Industrialized perspectives define intelligence as the ability to learn, to think logically, and to adapt to the environment. However, in 1983, and I came to teach here in 1980, so in 1980 when I was teaching this class and talking about intelligence, I didn't even have this information to give you. Isn't that nice to know that somebody did something to improve the quality of life in the area of intelligence? And I'm sorry it's crooked. I should have cut it off before I ran it through the copy machine, but I didn't. And for the people online, I'll upload this so you can look at it too. But we're going to talk about this a little bit, because it used to be, prior to 1983, when Gardner came up with this list, you would take an intelligence test that pretty much measured the ability to learn, to think logically, and to adapt to the environment. And then they would say, you scored high, so that makes you intelligent. And you scored low, so you're not intelligent. And Gardner says, you know, that's an oversimplification. He said, there's a lot of different kinds of intelligence. And what's the first one on the list? And who was that basketball player that could soar through the air from the top of the...
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. People asked him what he did, and here's what he said: I don't know what I do. I just do it. And they took movies of what he was doing to, frame by frame, analyze how he did what he did. And once a bunch of other basketball players studied what he did and emulated what he was doing, they became soar through the air slam dunkers too. And then some short guy under 6 feet, I think 5 feet something, enters the slam dunk competition, a guy named Spud Webb. You're this tall and you're going to slam dunk a basketball? I mean, you have to see it to believe it, don't you? There he goes. This little guy, whoom, builds up his leg muscles, soars up through the air, whoom, slams that basketball down through the hoop. The ability to use your physical body well. That would also be true of people who do downhill skiing and other kinds of athletics. Interpersonal. The ability to sense other people's feelings but tune in and tune in with others. Now, see, when it talks about examples, it says salespeople. Okay, I sold insurance for 5 years, and I was very successful at it, but I don't have a lot of interpersonal intelligence. That is, I'm not quick to pick up on other people's feelings, but the sales company, the company I went to work for, had a training program where they taught you to ask questions that got people to share their feelings. And as I asked those questions and people shared their feelings with me, then I became more successful as an insurance salesman, and I became more intelligent in the interpersonal area, because I realized by asking about their feelings about things, I was developing a relationship that resulted in them buying insurance, and I thought, this is a smart thing to do. So, in other words, I developed some interpersonal intelligence just by selling insurance for 5 years and going through an insurance sales training program. But I didn't have it naturally. I mean, some people just pick up on things naturally. Intrapersonal, self-awareness. Now, see, I was a little weak in the interpersonal, but I'm much stronger in the intrapersonal. Thinking about my thoughts and sitting there, just like I talked about my testimony and how I thought all that stuff through. I didn't share that with anybody. No one gave me anything. I just sat there inside thinking about all this stuff, and the end result was I go to church and get saved. Linguistic ability with people who just have a way with words. And then there's the rest of us who wish we could use words like they do. Logical, mathematical. Why am I smiling? There. I found the one that I have the most of. And guess what? I became a math and Bible teacher on the high school level and the junior high level. And I discovered, how many of you are high in logical mathematical? You're not going to put your hand up?
I don't know if I'm high. I just know I have like a decent amount. I don't know if I'm
Okay.
high.
So you would say maybe logical mathematical is more like my interpersonal, or my interpersonal intelligence. That it's like I might not be way up there, but I've got some of it. But nobody else raised their hand?
I definitely have it more than with linguistics. Like,
Okay.
that's
And
for sure.
so you say I have more of that than I do linguistics? And I discovered as a math teacher that I could either teach to the person who really likes math like I do and let the rest of the people drown or die on the vine, or I could figure out why other people have trouble with math and learn how to help them understand it. And that's why I went to school and studied psychology, so I could get inside your head and help you learn math. And I'm not as good at it as I'd like to be. Boy, I just gave a test. I need to work at becoming a better math teacher. But I will tell you this, I do have a lot of logical mathematical ability, pretty high in intelligence, but let me tell you something. To be a math teacher and to be a certified math teacher, you have to have a major in mathematics. So I kept taking math courses at the university till I had a major in math. And the last course I took, all of a sudden it didn't just come naturally to me. I was struggling with it, and I'm going, oh no. It's like I'm bumping my head on the top of my intelligence capacity for mathematics. So I thought, you know what? I'm not going to be a brilliant mathematician, but I know enough math to teach math to a lot of people for a long time. Musical ability, there's one where I get a 0. Now here's what's sad about that. I like music, but I can't do it. I thought one time, since I liked it, that I might have some natural musical ability, so I signed up for piano lessons for a year, practiced 45 minutes a day. And at the end of the year, my piano teacher said, Tom, I've never had a student work as hard as this as you have. But he said, you're wasting your money and you're wasting your time. It's not going to happen. You're not going to become a piano player. I said, okay, that's life. And the reason it didn't devastate me is because I have plenty of logical mathematical stuff going on. And what it did for me is to have a whole new appreciation for what it takes to be a musician and enjoy the music that much more because of it. And then one time we had a music teacher here at school who wanted the faculty to sing in chapel. And he told us all to come to practice, and I didn't show up. And he said, Tom, I want everybody there. I said, you don't want me there? He said, yes, I do. I went to the next practice, and after practice, he said, you don't have to come back if you don't want to. I said, I told you didn't want me here in the first place. I just don't have whatever it takes to be musical. But that's okay, because I've got lots of something else. Naturalistic intelligence, people tuned into nature, and spatial intelligence. I have some of that, because my wife says, Tom, it's amazing. If you go someplace, you just kind of have a sense of where you are and where things are and where we are and how to get there. I'm going, yeah, for some reason, I probably could have been a sailor or a navigator. Not a surgeon or a sculptor or a painter. So you see, you can have a lot of spatial intelligence, but it might be more the sailor kind. Now, what I want to ask about this, before we run out of time here, is, okay, we've looked at all these categories. Have all of you found one that you have quite a bit of? How many have found at least one you have quite a bit of? All of you? Okay, have you found one, have you found two that you have more of than the rest of them? Anybody found two that you have more of than the rest of them? Is there anybody here who has none of these? You say, yeah, I have some of them. I'm just not sure I have enough to be called intelligent. Yes, you do. But I have a brother who didn't do well in school, but he's a brilliant mechanic, auto mechanic. He can listen to a motor and tell you what's wrong with it and what part you need to buy to fix it. What kind of intelligence would that be? Would that be one of these? Or should we add one at the bottom and call it what? What kind would that be if he's a mechanic? Mechanical intelligence? In other words, if Gardner makes a list of 8, that doesn't mean his list is exhaustive. We could add to the list. And would mechanical intelligence be a category to add if you've ever met a brilliant mechanic who can just fix things? Do any of you know anyone who has a lot of culinary intelligence? That's not listed here, is it? Cooking? Anyone know anyone with culinary intelligence? So that's another category. Add that one to your list, culinary. You see what's beautiful about this? We can just keep adding to the list until maybe you say, I need to keep adding till I find the one that I have a lot of. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's move on and try to get this stuff done. Page 500 says 3 characteristics of gifted or talented children. They learn earlier and progress faster than other students. They march to their own drum beat. They teach themselves. They have their own way of learning and a unique way of organizing and sorting information. My brother didn't have anybody teach him how to do that. He just does it. He can take an engine apart and throw all the parts into a little bucket with solvent to clean them up. Then he can pull them out and put it back together. If I'm going to change the brakes on my car, I have to take the pieces and put them in line. And if some little kid comes by and kicks the pieces, I'm in trouble. I don't have that kind of intelligence. Mechanical intelligence that he has is just phenomenal. So, if you have some area of life where you learned earlier, progressed faster, and kind of marched through your own drum beat, have taught yourself some of that stuff, that would be an area that ought to be added to the intelligence list. Number 3 says they have a rage to master. and I'm not sure rage is the word I would use, but an intense craving for information and an obsessive need to make sense out of their favorite topics. I was sitting at home working a Sudoku this week, and I said to Nina, wow, I just love these Sudokus. I'm so glad I learned about these years ago and started working them. I go through about 3 or 4 of them a day because they just help keep my mind sharp. Well, time to quit, isn't it? You'll just have to cover the rest of this chapter on your own. Because we're going to do the last chapter on Friday.